We are joined this time every day by John McMullen, our 97.3 ESPN.com Eagles insider, and covers the NFL for today's Pigskin. Eagles got a preseason game tomorrow, and some news coming down the pipe about where the NFL draft is landing. Bring John on now. John, how you doing this afternoon?
Doing well. Thanks for having me, Josh.
So let's start with the news. Adam Schefter is reporting that it'll become official tomorrow that Philadelphia will be the host city of the 2017 NFL Draft. For the longest time, the draft was only in New York, and then they moved it to Chicago the last 2 years. And from what I understand, John, it's going to be in Philadelphia this year, and then they'll move it to Los Angeles next year. Is that correct?
Yeah, most likely it's not official, but that's the theory. When the new stadium in Los Angeles gets built, which is going to be a $3 billion enterprise, that's far more than a stadium. And one of the things they're going to have is a campus for NFL media. So the thought process has been they're going to make it permanent there like it was in New York. But there's still some lip service to taking it around and letting cities bid on it sort of in a mini Super Bowl format, because it works so well moving to Chicago. It's probably going to work well here, and there are many other cities that would like to have it. So there's still an outside chance that they might move it around from city to city, but I think it's probably 90% they're going to just decide to leave it in Los Angeles moving forward.
See, John, I hope they actually move it from city to city, because of the fact that, to me, a lot of these cities in the north are never going to get a Super Bowl. I mean, I don't know if I'll be alive the day that they actually have a Super Bowl in Philadelphia or in Pittsburgh. So to me, it's kind of a nice, we're not going to give you the Super Bowl, but we'll give you the NFL draft, kind of like handoff.
Yeah, I mean, they have had northern Super Bowls. Obviously, we just had New York a couple years ago.
Right, they had
North
Detroit,
Jersey.
Indianapolis.
They had Detroit. They had Minneapolis in the past, and they're having Minneapolis next year. So Philadelphia and Pittsburgh kind of missed their opportunity. And I think they did have an opportunity when their particular new stadiums were built. But things moved so quickly. All of a sudden you see, I don't know if you saw the Vikings' new stadium, but that just pales to what the Eagles and Steelers did. That's how quickly things moves. And you're going to see the same thing in Los Angeles when that thing is built. Atlanta, which has gotten a new Super Bowl because they're going to have a new stadium built. So, you know, at one time, Lincoln Financial Field was one of the top 5 stadiums in football. Unfortunately, things move so quickly that it no longer is. So now it's more difficult. And it's still a beautiful stadium. And by no means am I trying to say they should build a new one, because they shouldn't. But it's just going to be difficult to get a Super Bowl now. And I think they had a little bit of a window and didn't take advantage of it.
Looking ahead to that event, what kind of activities go on around the NFL draft usually can the Philadelphia fans look forward to?
Well, they usually have a draft town. They used to have it in Times Square around Radio City Music Hall, and they had it in Chicago. And I'm sure they're going to have it on the Parkway here in Philadelphia. So it's going to have a lot of sort of ancillary stuff for fans to enjoy and things of that nature. Obviously, though, the main event is the draft itself, and it's ironic because, of course, Philadelphia's getting the draft possibly for the first and last time, and they're not, at least as we sit here today, they don't have a first-round draft choice.
Of course, that could all change. I mean, Howie Roseman has turned out to be the trading wizards. Who knows what they could possibly manipulate something to get back into the first round. So,
oh, sure, it's always possible, but obviously it's far more difficult when you don't have a first-round pick. And the problem is, and Howie's spoken about this, he's been pretty honest about it, and the fact that he's got to be more inventive in adding talent for this team, and that's why you saw the trade for Dorial Green-Beckham, who might have a few red flags in his background. Maybe that wouldn't have been done if they didn't have to send so many draft choices to Cleveland. But that's the way he's going to have to go about it. The thing about, usually if you're trying to get back in the first round, you're going to have to give up a future first-round pick. And the Eagles, I don't think, want to get into that cycle. So I think it's going to be more difficult to get back in than people think, simply because Philadelphia doesn't want to do it.
John, let's transition back over to the Eagles. In general, they have the preseason game tomorrow night. John, I've been arguing that, to me, the fourth preseason game is a waste. I feel like they basically know who they're going to cut and who they're not going to cut before going into the game. And you wrote for today's Pigskin that it may be a good idea for the NFL to just get rid of some of these preseason games, because if they're so concerned about safety, then why don't they just get rid of them?
Yeah, I mean, I've advocated getting rid of the entire preseason. You don't need it. And the only reason it's there is obviously...
Wow, John, you went far beyond what I said.
Yeah. Well, think about it, Josh. I mean, we don't even think about... I mean, college teams don't have a preseason. They show up week one and they play, and there's no issue. And I've talked to enough coaches around this league, and they'll tell you they can get the same thing accomplished, and some say they can get more accomplished in a practice-type format than they can as far as reps for an individual game. But obviously, where it comes into, they charge full price for these games, parking, concessions, all that, all the bells and whistles of an NFL game. You can't replace that if you go to dual practices between teams or even scrimmages at smaller venues. You can't replace that kind of revenue, and that's been the struggle. And the NFL has talked about eliminating some preseason games, but in turn, they want to add regular season games and go to 18. And I think this is an opportunity for the league to sort of get back and say, you know what, we're not going to worry about the lost revenue. We're concerned about the safety of the players. And I think that would be a rare PR win for the league. But while I say that, I don't think in a million years they're going to do it.
John, I don't know if you got to hear me earlier, but here's my theory. So my theory is you cut it back to 2 preseason games, and then you require every team to do these inter-squad scrimmages with each other, at least one of them. So maybe every year you have the Eagles and the Steelers inter-scrimmage if they're not going to play during the regular season. And then the NFL, who's been pining apparently for another regular season game, they can get the players to give them that 17th game.
Yeah, I mean, it would be better. I mean, anything would be better. If you can get rid of 1 preseason game or 2 or 3, anything's better than the current format. So I would certainly say that's an improvement, but it's the same issue that I was just talking about. The problem is you can't replace the revenue, and that's always been the issue. Now, if you get the extra regular season game, and the NFL actually wants 2 extra regular season games.
Well, now they're just beating Green.
Then you have, then you have a whole Pandora's box opening as far as the safety issue, because obviously, players have argued if we're going to play that many games, you have to expand the rosters, and that's going to create more jobs, which is good for the players, but obviously less revenue for the teams. So there are a host of issues they have to work out, but the biggest one from the NFL side is you can't claim you're concerned about the safety of the players and add 2 games. You just can't do that. And that's a hurdle I don't think they're ever going to be able to overcome.
Sports Bash here on 97.3 ESPN. We're being joined by John McMullen on 97.3 ESPN.com. Eagles Insider also covers the NFL for today's Pigskin. John, tomorrow night is the 4th preseason game, and one of the interesting things I took away from the Doug Peterson presser yesterday was him saying that Lane Johnson is going to get playing time tomorrow night. Can you give us a little bit of an explanation for why?
Well, he hasn't been suspended yet. So, if Lane Johnson is available for week 1, you have to play him. It's as simple as that. He's one of your best players. So if the suspension doesn't come down, and it's looking more and more likely. We're 11 days away, 12 days away from the start of the regular season. And you still have to have the B sample isn't in. You still have to have the suspension. You still have to have the appeal. It's now looking more likely than not that Lane Johnson is going to be available for the Week 1 game. And if that's the case, if you're the Philadelphia Eagles, you have to play him. And because they thought originally that the suspension would be in effect, they went with their plan B, which is moving Alan Barber outside and starting either Isaac Seumalo or Stefan Wisniewski at left guard. And they had to do that. It was understandable. They took reps away from Lane Johnson. But now that there is at least a 50-50 chance that he's going to be available, well, you have to get him ready to play Week 1.
Why do you think the suspension is taking so long to come down for Lane Johnson?
That's a good question. As far as the appeals go, they only take place once a month. So that we kind of know is kind of structured. But as far as the B sample coming back, I think the timing was August 12th, I believe, was the exact date, when Lane said he expected the B sample to be back in 2 weeks. Well, we're past 2 weeks and it hasn't been back. So from that aspect, nobody really knows because of the clandestine nature of the PED and substance abuse policy. Nobody really, you talk to the league office, they're not willing to talk about it. Obviously, the Eagles have shut down. They're not willing to talk about it. So short answer to that is no one really knows why it's not back and why it's not moving forward. And then if Lane, from that point, when it finally does come back, Lane has claimed he's going to appeal. Now, he could always change his mind and say, I'm going to lose anyway. Let's start the suspension right now so it can be back later in the season. Or he can go ahead and go with the appeal. So there's a lot of moving parts to this, but from the Eagles' perspective, they have to get him ready to play.
Speaking of the Eagles' perspective, what is their perspective as they head into this fourth preseason game? Are they just looking at certain position battles? Are they just kind of letting guys play out the string? What is their perspective of the game for?
Well, I think like everybody, it's to get out healthy. And unfortunately, because of the nature of football and obviously how many people have to play, how rosters are constructed, there are certain guys who have to play in this game that are going to be part of the regular season roster. And if you're a coach in this league, you just mentioned how meaningless Week 4 is, and you're correct in that the Eagles have basically already made their decisions on who they're going to keep and who they're going to cut. Your lone and only goal is to get out of this game healthy, and that's not only for the Eagles, but the New York Jets and every other team in this league.
Speaking of the Eagles knowing who they're going to cut and not cut, what do you think is going on with the kicking situation? Because, I've heard a couple of different opinions this week about, between Parkey and Sturgis who should or shouldn't get the job. What are your information telling you from your eyes, from your ears, about who is going to end up being the kicker Week 1?
Well, if you talk to anybody who said Cody Parkey's going to be the kicker, I think you should have them drug tested because that's how much of a blowout this has been. Caleb Sturgis is going to be the Eagles kicker. It hasn't been close. As I said, it's basically, the Philadelphia 76ers over the past couple of years playing anybody. He got blown out by 40 points. It wasn't close. And there's no way that the Eagles can move forward with Cody Parkey, even if they think he's not healthy. The only saving grace for Cody, perhaps, is the possibility they can say he is not healthy, and we want to keep him in this organization so you can stick him on injured reserve and kind of save him that way if you think he can be rescued and sort of contribute next year. But there's absolutely no way that Caleb Sturgis is not going to be the kicker of this team.
Are there any positions specifically that have to do with the end of the roster that you think are going to come down to this game at all? Or is it just going to be basically, guys, let's hope we get in and get out?
No, I think it's guys hope we can get in and get out. I mean, there's always a chance, but I think if you go back to last year's fourth preseason game, if you remember that was the Tim Tebow game where he played pretty well, at least well for Tim Tebow. And everyone assumed, hey, he's going to make this football team. It didn't mean anything, the fourth preseason game. And obviously he didn't go on to make the Eagles. Now he's trying to be a baseball player. So there could be Marcus Smith and Stephen Means. If Stephen Means has another tremendous game, a 2-3 sack performance, maybe he could open some eyes. But, hey, most NFL teams, they realize how long we've been doing this and how long we've been in camp now. And you have practices every day, and the coaches get to see these players up close every day. One day out of all that time is not going to sway their opinion if something is 50-50 or 51-49 right now. So, I want everyone to tune in to 973 ESPN, listen to the game. You should be excited about seeing the Eagles. But as far as this game being meaningful for coaches making roster decisions, I just don't think it is.
A couple of stories around the NFL, John, to get to here. Officially came down that Teddy Bridgewater, complete tear of the ACL, dislocated knee, an injury that I'm very familiar with because I had the same thing happen to me almost 7 years ago, and it was also no one touched me either. So, I feel Teddy Bridgewater's pain, but looking at the Vikings moving forward now, obviously, I don't think they want to go into a season with the hopes and prayers and dreams on the shoulders of Sean Hill. So what do you think they're going to do to supplement the quarterback position?
Well, they're going to have to bring in somebody because they need a backup now. And the only player on their roster is Joel Stave, who's an undrafted free agent from Wisconsin. He would be the backup. They're going to re-sign Brad Sorensen, who's was just basically a camp arm that they cut when they went down to 75. And that's just about getting through Thursday night's game for them because they don't want to put Sean Hill. Sean Hill's going to be the starter of this team. And you're right. Do you want to put your hopes on that? Is that the best case scenario? Obviously not. But he's a 36-year-old guy. He's been around for 15 years.
John, he has a career 46 quarterback rating. I mean, this guy. I mean, really?
No, I think I don't. No, it's not that bad. He's 16-18 as a starter in his career, but this is the best team he's been on. And hey, the Vikings have to go about things differently. It's an entire different game plan. I shouldn't say entirely different because obviously the strength of their team was the running game with Adrian Peterson and the defense to begin with. But you had the knowledge that a lot of people in Minneapolis thought Teddy Bridgewater was going to be a star, and this might have been the year where he took off. You don't have that sort of ability at the most important position anymore. You just don't. So you have to win games similar to what the Eagles want to do here. They instead of winning games with 28 or 31 points, you got to win them 20-17, 17-14. And the Vikings are equipped to do that. But before this injury, they were pretty much, you never say lock in this league, but they were going to be a playoff team. And after this injury, now it's going to be nip and tuck every week. It's going to be like pulling teeth to try to win games. And I still think they're going to be relevant because they're that good defensively. But it's going to be that much more difficult. And instead of having the ceiling of a Super Bowl contender, now their ceiling is probably a wild card team.
Speaking of teams that could probably use a backup quarterback, the Cowboys today have restructured the contract of Orlando Scandrick, giving them more cap room. So is that a sign that they might go out also and grab a backup for at least 6 to 10 weeks for Dak Prescott?
Yeah, there's no doubt, and the Vikings are too, by the way. I mean, there's already talk that Mark Sanchez is earmarked for Minnesota. We'll see. The Cowboys are meeting with Austin Davis. They have to bring somebody in, whether it's somebody that they might be interested in Sanchez as well. There's a lot of guys around the league. Zach Mettenberger's already out there. Aaron Murray's probably going to get cut in Kansas City. So those are the names you're talking about. As far as high-level trades, people have talked about A.J. McCarron moving. Why would the Cincinnati Bengals want to move A.J. McCarron?
Exactly.
Then you're in the same position the Vikings are in if Andy Dalton goes down again. So the people who do have good backs, and by the way, count Philadelphia in that. People have speculated, hey, now's your time to trade Sam Bradford. The Eagles aren't trading Sam Bradford. They're not trading Chase Daniel. If anything, the trouble the Cowboys and the Minnesota Vikings, because they're both playoff contenders, is made things easier for the Eagles to possibly make a run toward the playoffs. So they're sticking status quo, and it's going to be Bradford, it's going to be Chase Daniel, it's going to be Carson Wentz as the third quarterback.
By the way, you can't forget also the Bears need a backup quarterback after Connor Shaw going down. So even though they're not really a playoff team at this point, they need a backup as well.
Yeah, I think Brian Hoyer is in Chicago. I have to double-check that. But I often say, if you ask me, Josh, who the best backup quarterback in football is, the name I'm going to give you is Drew Stanton. And I think he is the best backup quarterback in football. And it's a very good situation. As you saw a couple of years ago when Carson Palmer got hurt, Drew kept that team's head above water. But while you say that, that's the reality of the NFL. It's any team, if they lose their starting quarterback, they're in deep, deep, deep trouble. There are some teams worse off than others. Obviously, in Minnesota is pretty bad off because Sean Hill is not in the conversation for being one of the better backups.
Sports Bash here on 97.3 ESPN, talking with John McMullen. One more thing for you, John. Report coming over here is that the Browns would only trade Josh McCown for a high draft pick, to which I say, what is this team that would trade a high draft pick for Josh McCown?
Well, yeah, they're trying to take advantage of the desperation of certain teams. It's obvious. I think the Jets are. The Jets have claimed they might keep 4 quarterbacks. They're not. They're going to cut either Geno Smith or Bryce Petty. And the Cowboys and Vikings are smart enough to know this. If anything, Minnesota might send a 7th-round pick to Denver for a Mark Sanchez, just so you don't have to wrangle with other teams and worry about signing him when he hits the open market. But when you talk about Josh McCown or Geno Smith, and these teams have these grandiose dreams of getting 3rd-round picks, Rick Spielman is not that dumb, and even Jerry Jones is not that dumb.
John, appreciate you joining me as always, but I do have some good news for you today, despite all the craziness in the NFL.
I'm waiting.
Chris Mortensen is coming back for the 2016 season.
Yeah, that's good. Obviously, anytime somebody's having health problems, it's really, really good to see when they're able to get back to work. And obviously, he's been one of the biggest names as far as NFL reporters for years. And he was one of the trailblazers as far as when people say NFL Insider and things like that. So, and he's a great guy. So that's always a positive, and it's good to have him back.
Just want to leave you on that positive note, John. John McMullen, our Eagles insider at 97.3 ESPN.com, also NFL columnist for today's Pigskin. John, catch you tomorrow.
Hey, thank you, Josh.